Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Wednesday, February 18th, 2026 at 11:01 in the morning. And so we're here to continue our discussions on the FY27 budget. So we have representatives from the Regional Planning Commission. Charlie, Catherine, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Happy to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, for the record, Charlie Baker, I'm the Executive Director of the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, but also serve as a chair of our kind of like the Legislative Relations Committee. So that's why you see more of me than others. Apologies.
And I'm Catherine Dimitruk. I'm Executive Director of Northwest Regional Planning Commission. We serve Franklin and Grand Isle counties.
So we just got, well, I guess 20 slides here maybe. So just kind of give you a sense of what we do, and we'll dig into the budget a little bit. I think most of you know we provide staff support and technical assistance to towns and the state. The absence of county government play a critical role in connecting communities with federal and state programs, as well as a forum or really that venue for towns to discuss and provide services jointly. We are political subdivisions of the state, and were created to serve all the municipalities of the state back in 1968. So we're just starting to figure it out.
Quality year. A lot of good things happened.
I'm guessing Catherine may have been born that year, but I'm not going to ask because that would be too much. So these are the topic areas. Sometimes when we talk about it, I think of this as just kind of generally the place-based work. We don't get involved in healthcare or education, doing place-based work, whether it's water quality or economic development or energy or housing, all the things that end up landing on the landscape. Some quick facts. So there's 11 of us. We have about 135 staff. Sometimes I think like maybe the state should think of us as almost a state agency. And then just a couple notes of some services where we help these are FY25 highlights. So every year we do reporting out on all of our programming to all of our funding agencies. And then we do a summary report, which I think give you I think I also got attached to a 2-page summary of our annual report. At the end of this is a link. If you want to dive in and see what your RPC did in more detail, there's a link to a 100+ page report that has all the detail from all of the RPCs. Last year we did 143 towns in equity environmental justice work. That will probably that reached a peak at the end of the Biden administration. I don't expect that number to increase. Governance. So we're all run by our municipalities. They all make appointments to our boards. Our boards set our budgets and policy program priorities, including our regional plans. We all have like executive committee, so a subset of our board that oversees the executive director. And then we typically have a bunch of committees: transportation, permit, regulatory, kind of Act 250 to participate in Act 250, regional plan, clean water, et cetera. Happy to take any questions if you get them. But funding, so we have no general tax revenue. We have no taxing ability whatsoever. And about 95% of our revenue comes from state and federal grants, about 5% from town dues. That's a general number across the state, up and down in different regions. And I think we kind of talk about we almost act like the public sector consulting agency. So we're really working on performance-based grant agreements with different agencies or the towns. So we only get paid, almost always it's a reimbursement grant. So we have to do the work. If we're the town or the agency satisfied, we get paid. Sometimes there's some agencies, more on like human services, we'll get something from the health department. Sometimes they fund us up front, but that's a rare situation. And you can see hopefully that list of acronyms looks somewhat familiar. Been in the State House long enough. I don't know. But let me know if there's anything you're wondering. But
We created those.
yeah, lots of them. Some are federal. And then just to get to brass tacks on the specific budget request. So the kind of the core funding program for RPCs is the regional planning grant program. That is funded through a statutorily set portion of the property transfer tax. So we are in that boat with VHCB and the municipal planning grant program. So those three programs are all funded by the property transfer tax. In this fiscal year, there was an approved budget of 7.74. The BAA that I think the House just passed out recently, there was a reduction in the property transfer tax revenue. And so there was a 1.3% cut in the BAA to our funding, just to kind of reflect what's happening with the property transfer tax. The governor's recommended budget is 7.838580, a 2.6% increase. We had made a request of the administration as to kind of follow the same guidance that he had given all the agencies, which was a 3%. Because all of us have healthcare costs and other things that go up every year. So that is the specific request that we're hoping that you might be able to support in your budget letter to approach. And then the rest of this kind of digs into more detail on different programming areas and stuff. But any specific questions on the budget amount? Or
We're hearing from another property transfer tax entity yesterday, VHCB.
Yeah.
And there's, is it the Agency of Digital Services? There's another.
Yeah.
entity.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that got
BCGI.
small.
BCGI, and so are you all, do you find with the RDC or the RPCs that there's this haircut is consistent? Is it?
Yeah, we all got that
you get the-
1.3%.
And is the notwithstanding stuff happening all the time, some of the time? Who knows?
That is SOP.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's most of the time.
I don't know that there's been time where it hasn't been
At a
necessary.
1.3% kind of range, or
Oh, you're talking about the BAA cut?
I'm just thinking when things happen with the notwithstanding language, are you seeing appreciably less than what the statutory language would direct otherwise? Or is it usually pretty close?
This, Jonathan is making, sorry, Representative is making reference to, in the property transfer tax, the statutorily set formula, there was a formula there. It did get tweaked a couple of years ago, so I'm not as familiar with the new methodology. The old methodology would have had us, and this goes back now like 3 or 4 years, would have had us over 10 million if we were actually getting the formula. So we've been under what the statute said in terms of that formula for, I think since the beginning. Maybe the second year we're at the formula, but property transfer tax has gone up and we were pretty level funded for a long time. So this is the first time I think that we've seen a BAA cut from property transfer tax revenue decrease. I'm trying to think back in time. I think we saw one after the real estate crash in 2008-9. And there was a reduction there, but that was like across lots of programs.
Everything.
Yeah. So I don't know, does that answer your
It does.
question?
I didn't realize that the Budget Adjustment Act was usually, that's an unusual thing in terms of where that occurs. So,
Yeah, I can't
okay.
think of a
Thank you.
year where that has happened before.
Okay.
So I think, it just maybe
to
points to some softness in the real estate market, and not meeting the projections.
I can confirm that.
Yeah, yeah. Good, thank you for that. Yeah, I don't know if you want to pick up something else.
And so as Charlie noted, that this funding that we get from the state through the property transfer tax is really our foundational funding. And we use that to leverage everything else. So we leverage, anywhere from, 4 to 7 times that amount of funding through direct grants from the federal government and helping state agencies leverage federal dollars that come to the state. And so because of that, we really do serve as this critical link between municipalities and the state. As you know, being legislators, Vermont has this great tradition of adopting a state policy and then expecting 250 entities to implement it. And so we are the tool that helps the state implement those state policies through our work with our municipalities. And because we work in so many areas from housing to transportation to land use, we really can take an integrated approach to that. So when we help a town with a project, we're going to look at water quality and transportation and all of the factors that are impacted.
So I would attest to, you talk about the link between what you guys do and your base funding and sort of foundational kind of thing to help the towns, in municipality. My experience, you guys do a great job. And it's even more critical because I think you have real challenges right now. You got to very complex and challenging statute, Act 181. But my question, that's great. So what portion, you got this base amount for the property transfer tax, and you leverage it, I think, to get monies from other state agencies and federal government. What proportion, how does it break out in terms of what your grant funding is from these other state federal agencies versus your base amount? And the reason why I ask it is that, I mean, the activities have got to be congruent with the grant, right?
Yeah.
And I like the base funding because that really helps municipalities. And the other stuff's good too, but it isn't so much focused on how do we help municipalities. Right?
Sometimes it's, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Catherine kind of mentioned, what did you say, 5 to 7 times, I think. So this is probably, 15 to 20%
Right.
of the rest of our funding, if I was gonna aggregate it, I think we're probably in the 30 something million dollar range statewide. So this is the real core funding and it's been steadier and more the base, because as you mentioned, kind of the other grant programs, some things have come in, we work on something for a few years and then that ends and we work on something else for a few years.
So it ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Right. And from these towns' perspective, that's great, but they're looking for some specific help. And so
And that's really what.
it's a dilemma, I think, right?
Yeah, and that really is what this base funding gives us, it's that stability. So when the, federal funds ebb and flow, we're still able to maintain this stable core of trained staff to be available to our towns. And the staff foundation is crucial.
Thank you.
And so, as you noted, we are spending a lot of time working on implementing Act 181. All of the regional planning commissions are on track to have our regional plans updated by the end of December of this year. We've had over 500 meetings with towns and the general public, with thousands of citizens engaged. As a quick note, we are not responsible for implementing the road rule or Tier 3. That is an entirely separate process. So we are only responsible for updating our regional plans, which set Tier 1. I feel like I need to say that in every room we're in. Yeah, and so our work is right on track, and I think we have some potential changes to statute we're working on in some other committees to make that go even more smoothly, but all in all, we're on track to be on time. And so because so many of our towns just lack staff, because they don't need a lot of staff on a regular basis or from a funding and resource perspective, the RPCs really do serve as a technical resource. We serve as the town staff. In several cases, we actually serve as a zoning administrator in towns that have contracted with us. And you can see, almost every town in the state has gotten some form of technical assistance from the regional planning commissions. If you have a town plan or zoning bylaws, we're here to help and we serve in that role.
Sure. And then, housing has been a significant focus the last few years. So those are things, and, it's very related to the zoning work also. We are working with towns on that and also trying to reduce the risk from permit appeals, especially in the growth areas that towns are planning, that we're working on mapping right now. We could talk a lot more about that. Economic development, even though we have regional development corporations and some of us, sorry, I need to have a different hat on here. There's 2 of the RPCs are combined RPCs, RDCs, regional development corporations, corners of the state. And the others of us have just a partner RDC that we work, closely with, depending on the topic issue. They kind of, the split, I always think, is just for clarity, is they're working with employers, we're working with towns. And sometimes there's a need to work together on something, but that's the simplistic split.
Another example of how we bring in the different disciplines is in our region, the northwest part of the state, we've had a 26-mile rail trail there forever that nobody really paid attention to until the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail was built. But we have this gem of the Missisquoi Valley Rail Trail that we've managed and promoted. And we developed a trail-friendly business program so businesses can market themselves to trail users. And through a collaborative effort with the Agency of Transportation, we're now expanding that to the Lamoille Valley Railroad as the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail as well. So it was really an opportunity for businesses to capitalize on the tourism economy that the trails create.
Yeah, and the other way to think about that, the difference in our work is like we're doing community development and they're doing economic development. Again, town versus employer type work. Related to that, brownfields has been a program that the RPCs have been heavily involved with for a long time now. So you may be familiar, like there's some brownfields money and the state may have asked you for brownfields money for either Agency of Commerce or A&R at times. We have typically gone straight to EPA. So we apply to EPA directly for these funds. And you can see like NVDA up in the Kingdom. They got an assessment grant for 1.2 million and a $1 million revolving loan fund in 23. And they, and they got another grant. They've done 40 sites. So anyways, EPA brownfield work is something that has been kind of a core program, although it is a federal discretionary grant. So there are times where our grant money runs out and we're kind of pending. I know I went through that a couple of years ago where we didn't have brownfield money for a couple of years. And so then we're kind of more reliant on the state program.
Your neighbors.
And our neighbors. So we often, sorry, pointed at Catherine, just she is a neighboring region, but she has a revolving loan fund. And so she's been able to help like property owners in my region if we're out of brownfield money. So.
Are you hearing about, we just heard from Andy, the issue with increased levels of arsenic and lead in the soils as being an issue for development?
Or increased standards.
Yeah.
The changing the standards.
Reducing the thresholds.
Yeah, we do have some concerns about that as well. Yes. Public health and environmental health is crucially important, but soil disposal costs are a huge driver of the expense of downtown redevelopment projects, and I'm afraid this will potentially expand that.
Yeah, it would be good if we could find some different solutions, like, and there may be properties where, especially in more urban situations where these this historic arsenic is like, do we really need to like dig it all up and take it out, or can we just leave it in and, we're in a more urban place, you might just be paving it and it's under the parking lot. There aren't any kids playing in it, which might be the concern, but so I would hope there could be some other solutions rather than just ratcheting up the.
I know a potentially multi-million-dollar project was killed in Milton because of soil.
Yeah, so not a great dynamic. Transportation planning has also been a core program for 35 years at least, maybe getting on 40 years now with VTrans. So VTrans takes some of their planning money and share some with each RPC to do local transportation planning work, and that feeds up into VTrans. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, and you can see a little example here. Rutland kind of worked with their transit agency to evaluate their transit service and get to a more efficient, effective service.
And I think I will add, transportation is definitely one of those areas where our work is from the very basic, like helping towns with the road inventories or doing trainings for public works crew, all the way up to, helping the state to accomplish what FHWA requires them to do. So we work from the very basic TA with technical assistance to towns, all the way up to, being of service to the agency.
Clean water, another area. And this is, Vermont passed their Clean Water Act in 2015. And then there was an update a number of years ago to focus more on non-regulatory clean water projects. A number of us in the Champlain Basin have become in A&R lexicon, we've become clean water service providers. So we're actually working with property owners to do individual clean water projects to help meet the clean water goals outside of the regulatory environment. And this slide mentions grants and aid, but we've also been using some transportation money, again, on that road erosion inventory type work and trying to reduce road runoff. Anything else to add?
Yeah, and then emergency planning and response, luckily the past couple of years that we haven't had 2 years now, serve as staff in the State Emergency Operations Center, but all of the RPCs do have trained staff that can help state and emergency serve in the Emergency Operations Center. We also work with our towns on basic emergency preparedness, from their local emergency response plan to federally required local hazard mitigation plans that are required to access hazard mitigation funding for projects. And then we really serve as a general liaison through our municipalities and state agencies to make sure that our towns are just fully prepared for eventual disasters that we know will come.
And just a note that that kind of relationship with the VEM, the Vermont Emergency Management, really grew a lot after Irene. And that was a big threshold moment. There's been a lot of turnover in staff, and also a lot of questions about federal funding in this area. And so we do have some concern about our ability to continue to be of assistance to the state in this, and the implications of that if more events happen. So not that this committee should be addressing that,
But
but
it is important
to let you know.
from a stable economy perspective. The funding that FEMA does provide to the state that supports about a half-time person in each RPC to be the expert in emergency management, that funding's been held up. So we've been working without funding at the state and the regional level since the end of September in this area. And we're managing to keep going, but we are going to need to look at it if that becomes a long-term issue. And so just to be aware of.
Okay. Asking on that, are you allocating staff time you're seeing to that individual is being brought onto other projects within the RPC's remit, or you have some places had to reduce staff?
I don't think any of us have cut yet, just because we're,
Hopeful.
yeah, I think VEM is communicating some level of hope. So we'll see how that plays out. But this is another really important use of that base funding, because, in the absence of a specific grant, we'll do what we can with that base regional planning funding. Or maybe we can shift to another project at the time. Yeah.
So we have had we've triaged a bit and really focused on the core areas of helping our towns do their local plans, and being available if there is a disaster to be that point of contact with the towns, and then working on the local hazard mitigation plans. But any of the general, like education, outreach, coordination, collaboration, that is definitely, we've had to cut back on that.
Yeah. And one spin I think that some of us are doing is like kind of working with VTrans, using more transportation money, because a lot of the impacts are on the transportation infrastructure when we have an event. And so we're maybe using more transportation money to do some of this work. So trying to move things forward in the app.
Short term, we can manage without the funding. Long term, we'd have to do some cuts and reallocations. Underpinning all of this, we have GIS and mapping capabilities that we use for data analysis for mapping purposes. And we provide that service to all of our municipalities, to state agencies. We support local planning through that. We support the erosion inventories. We use it for emergency preparedness, and we use it in all areas of our work.
It probably, if you see a map in a town office, it probably says produced by their RPC.
Yeah.
So in terms of the implementation of 181, you have the GIS mapping, then you have some A&R mapping that sort of overlays on that. Can you talk about how that works at Up North?
I'll just say in general, when we talk about mapping, it's very rare that we're the primary producer of a map. In other words, we're using other people's layers. It might be the town zoning layer, it might be a lot of A&R layers, that we're using to inform other mapping processes. So, yeah, that's just kind of typical of, using them and, yeah, and then trying to figure out how best to apply them is always part of the question.
And so because our maps aren't regulatory, our regional plan maps don't have any, we don't control local zoning or we don't issue permits ourselves. It doesn't have the same import as maybe what was talked about this morning in the rural caucus. But we do use, let's say, the ANR's atlas to look at where are the major wetland complexes, where are the, key endangered species habitat areas, so that when we're doing our regional plan and we say, like, here's an area where conservation should be a primary goal, we'll use that data to help do those maps. Oh, so energy. So the state of Vermont has an optional enhanced energy planning effort that towns can do. If you do a more detailed energy plan, your plan gets additional weight in the Public Utilities Commission process. And we help our towns do those plans and help them implement the plans through a variety of programs, including one that we're working with through the Department of Buildings and General Services, which is the Municipal Energy Resilience Program, where we're helping towns implement energy efficiency improvements on municipally owned buildings. They'll extend the life, they'll make them healthier buildings and save taxpayer dollars in the long run.
This was something, I think the full program was like 40-something million, but even as of the end of June, 36 million had gone into those buildings and things, so. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just noticed the time. I'm expected next door at 11:30, so I'm gonna jump out. Charlie, you're in good
I'm almost done.
Yes.
And this last substantive slide is just noting, almost everything we're doing, like there's very little that we do by ourselves. It's all in partnerships. And here's an example from Bennington County, where they've been supporting the CUD through the startup, and then after things have been implemented, they got to monitor what's going on for the next 10 years. So they're providing that staff support to that new level of government that had to be created to do the broadband work. But that's just one example, but we're constantly working with partners all the time. It's kind of, we're in the relationship business, I think we often say. And that's what we got. This last slide does that. The detailed VAPTA annual report is what I referred to earlier, has like it. And if you want to scroll through it and dig into your RPC, there's a detail there. And you can see our state association website also there. Happy to take any more questions or questions for Charlie.
Hi, Charlie. I really appreciate the work that you do. I know we've talked about this a lot, and I'm trying to understand how we can leverage the knowledge that the RPCs have more than we have been so far. Right now, from the outsider looking in, it appears mostly that you're kind of a receptacle of information, you're cataloging, organizing, but you're not really taking what you have and pushing it out to anybody who doesn't ask for it, right? Anybody who asks is getting that full support and all of that. But sometimes I like to think of regional planning a little more broadly than that. And so I'm curious if there's something that could be done differently, that, is happening differently in parts of the state. How do we do better with what we have?
So always a good question. And certainly I'd like to think that we're bringing all of our resources to bear when we're working with the town, particularly on their town plan or their zoning and or elements of a town plan, like we're doing bike ped plans or whatever it might be. So hopefully that happens. And I don't know, I'm curious to maybe explore that further. I don't know if I thought about it exactly in that way. Partly we see that part of our role here, like trying to bring perspectives here, because we see a lot of different agencies. Hopefully that you got a flavor of that. And so, happy to talk with legislative committees in particular. Seems to be a place where we try to bring some of that broader perspective in. But always happy to see if there are other places where we can be more helpful. And because most towns don't have staff, you know, I think we often look at ourselves as like, we gotta kind of be the consistent staff person to help, but for small towns, really. Like, you know, they don't have anybody else, so we need to be there. It may be very intermittent, but we need to be there to help. So I don't know, happy to talk more about that. Thank you.
And then are there things that you do that have been more effective in the past, are less of what we need today? You know, versus, like, are there, I'm just wondering, you know, we continue to have a limited pot of money and, you know, the resources that you provide are great. The knowledge that that the RPCs have is outstanding. I'm just trying to come up with, how do we leverage it?
And get more efficient. Yeah.
Not even more efficient, but just to be using it in a way that is getting more output, right? More productive, yeah.
You know, honestly, going through this 181 process, and we just recently had conversation with the board chair there, so I won't quote her at all, but she can speak for herself, but one of the things, there's a lot of requirements that have been added to the Vermont planning statute over decades. And it's kind of overwhelming, and I'm not sure that's that useful at the point we're at now. And so just to try to make it a little light of it, you know, I think the LURB, the Land Use Review Board, as they've been reviewing our regional plans, and been like, oh my God, I got a 700-page document here. Like, what the heck? They're like, maybe you could reduce some of the requirements in the planning statute that aren't really that useful. I think that's one area where it feels like we're spending effort without return. And just, it doesn't always help the town move forward in a strategic way. It's just, we're covering 100 different requirements and then it sits. And we don't actually make progress. So I don't know, that's, when you talk about that, that's the one area that has come up recently that seems like there's some opportunity to improve, for sure.
So that was part of my question that you answered, but is that idea of like, what are we doing that's not useful, right? That has been layered on for
Yeah.
decades, and how do we go about fixing that? And then the second piece is really about, I feel like every issue we talk about in this building, somebody brings up rural capacity or town capacity, and then there's another maybe proposed resource to provide capacity for towns. And are there things that other organizations are doing that maybe makes more sense for the RPC to take on? And you know, like there's just in what we've heard in the past couple of days, there's like the READY program, there's MTAP, which maybe doesn't have money anymore.
Yes.
There's the Verta study. It's just, it seems like there's a lot of different entities providing technical assistance, or trying to fund technical assistance. And is there a better way to deliver that?
Probably above my pay grade. Because, you know, I think we work well with all those partners. I do think more broadly the structure of government in Vermont. Sorry, now you opened a Pandora box, but
That's all right.
It's coming.
That's what we want.
Watch them go. But sorry, and you know, I worked in a couple of states before moving to Vermont, almost 20 years ago now, so I'm just starting to figure things out. But sometimes it does feel like that. But you know, we have town and state government, and we're for 600,000 people. You know, in lots of other states, that's a decent sized county. And so the state does some more things here than maybe they do in other states where they push some more things out of the local government. But on the other hand, you look at local government capacity and it's really not there. I mean, yeah, I work in Chittenden County and, you know, at least half my towns is a challenge. I mean, you guys are picking on Milton, but you guys are now over 10, 11,000 people. Like they have some staff and some capacity, but most of the towns don't. And then we kind of say, well, they should share services. Honestly, it's really difficult to share services here because you got to get two select boards to agree. And this is where I think the biggest gap is. There is not a true mechanism that makes it easy for towns to share services. And so we've been kind of, flirting with and floating a little bit this council of governments idea. I don't know if that's exactly the right model, but something like that, where a town could say, hey, I want a zoning administrator. Would you guys do that? And then kind of leave it up to us. Like maybe we can get 3 other towns to join in and we're hiring one person and providing staff to multiple towns. But that dynamic could happen over and over and over. And that's where I think we're seeing the real inefficiency in the system is the expectations on the towns just don't line up with reality. And then, it's either things fall through the crack, regional assessment, like, not that we want to do reassessments, but the day-to-day assessment, like, does that need to be town by town? I don't know, I worked for a county before coming here, was done at the county level. That seemed to be really efficient and effective, and professional, and got done easily. So I don't know, sorry, that's my regional governance jag.
I'm with you. Thank you for all of this wonderful information. I was wondering if you had a sense of like what your multiplier effect is from the $7 billion.
Yeah, it's like a 5 to 6 times. So I haven't actually gone through all the RPC budgets lately, but I think probably in aggregate, we're like 35 million. So 7 times 5, 35 million. Plus or minus.
I'm gonna go back to Pandora's box here.
I gotta leave.
We are one of what? 2 states that don't have a county government.
Most of New England doesn't really, but yeah.
Do you think that is part of what do you think a county government would help?
I don't think county government is really compatible with the culture in Vermont. And partly I say that, like, we have a really strong, the town meeting tradition is like a really strong, like, special thing about Vermont, right? It's what bottoms up. So I think maybe some flavor of county, but like a true county government would be, let's elect county commissioners and they're gonna decide, they're gonna run the county roads and the county health department and county something else, I don't know, sewer system, I don't know. That doesn't feel Vermonty to me, but something where like the chairs of the select boards were all on the county board. So I think they're one of the intriguing models I saw recently is in New York, actually, which we don't usually look at New York for good models for Vermont. But I think, I don't know how many counties they have, but 12 of them have what they call a board of supervisors model, which is the chief elected official from the towns make up the county board. And then they kind of decide like what services do they want to do at their individual towns or do they want to aggregate at the county level? Like, oh, something like that. Something like that makes more sense to me of like having that option, but still have town elected officials be in charge of it. So
That's very helpful. Thank you.
And we can drink.
So one of the things I wanted to ask about was sort of, we talk a lot about, supervisory unions and goals to try to have things be of equivalent size, roughly close. And looking at the presentation, we have some fairly small geographic areas, some very large geographic areas among the planning commissions. Do you have a lot of variation in staff size commensurate with that? Or do you find that now there's a transportation person, there's an energy person?
Yeah. There seems to be kind of, I think everybody's probably, got a list of, we share a list of all of our staff. I think everybody's probably like at 8 is probably the minimum. And then some are larger than that, but I'm probably the largest. I have 24 staff. So that's kind of the range, but yeah, you're right. There's kind of a minimum level that needs to happen, for just to provide the basic services.
And thinking about like the base that it requires to do the work. And then there's other partnerships that have been referred to, I think, in this conversation, whether organizations sort of at the state level or whether are statewide nonprofits that kind of engage with other kinds of outreach or municipal work. Is that something that we've been sort of on the hunt this year and these, in testimony here for where are the things that are duplicative, where are the things that are more than one entity doing the same thing? how do you square the day-to-day sort of bread and butter operations of how an RPC engages with its constituent municipalities with state or like broader scale initiatives that are in and, you know,
For these like kind of sometime one-time
Yeah.
technical assistance
do
things.
you feel like you're able to participate in those fully, or is it sort of we'll hang out and help where we can? How does that work?
Sorry. I don't, it's a thorny relationship question a little bit, but, I think we kind of view ourselves as kind of like that core technical assistance provider for towns, like we were created literally to provide that function. And so the things that have been added, we've been like, well, maybe we could do that or, but we don't want to get into a competitive situation that, everything works better if we're all collaborating and working together. But again, there's probably ways to make it more efficient and effective, if you aggregate a bit.
You find staffing to be difficult? Like is hiring for a regional planner, which seems to be a bunch of different things, difficult?
Are you asking me or are you asking all the RPCs?
Oh,
All the RPCs? Yes.
but do you have a different answer?
Yes.
Oh,
No, it's not difficult for me, but
Okay.
because I'm in Burlington and
About the population mix.
it attracts crazy people. So it's easy for me to hire. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Representative Duke. Yeah, I happen to live in the district, so.
Noted, I have.
I was really referring to myself, I guess. No, but, and it is just because there's, more university students or whatever, it is a little easier for me.
Planner, maybe that's where you are.
Yeah, and also, and I've been able to like, probably my salary level is probably a little bit higher than others too, but our cost of living is also higher. So. Any more questions?
All right. Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you for indulging my flights of fancy there. Appreciate it.
Well, I think, the conversation of county government is something that it needs to continue here. We all can't have fire departments, especially in the rural areas. And we're just duplicating, and that's a lot of money that.
Yeah, one thing we didn't talk about was the bond, A&R had some money that they gave to the bond bank to help the fire districts. And so all the RPCs are kind of like, this was an interesting experiment because they're like, the fire districts they a municipal government, but not the municipal government, right? And they have the Prudential Board. Thank you. But the bond bank kind of came to us and was like, geez, mostly it's 3 older guys and they're getting older every day. And we're concerned about the continuity, like what happens. And so we're kind of like working with them to assess needs and things, but it's another little layer of municipal government. We have so many of these little layers that it seems like there's got to be a better way to do it. And encouragingly, I think the GovOps committees are continuing that county regional governance study, and they're going to report out by the end of the year. So,
Michael,
I was just gonna say, I mean, if we want to talk about county government, I'm more than willing to have that conversation, although that's not our jurisdiction.
they are having that
Oh, are they really?
pick up.
yeah, there's a county and regional governance study committee that got started in the last biennium. It really kind of
Some people.
went into hiatus for a while, but I think they are intending to start it up. I don't know when.
Restarted it, I think, in the fall.
Yes, that's it.
You're on it, great.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you are, great.
That's right.
Great. He's
Excellent.
one of my passions. Might also get me in trouble.
I have experience with merging of public safety issues. And it was not good. It is, it truly is. And
Yeah, Richmond and Heinsberg tried.
And we tried to have 6 towns do dispatch, which should have been like the easy basic one, but that was also ran into.
that's what the problem is, let's be honest. Okay, anyway, that's not topic of conversation. Sorry.
Charlie, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Like time for lunch. Okay. So back here, 1:00 sharp, we have ACTD back in. Commissioner Pelham, tourism and marketing, and Commissioner Jepson and Dan Dickerson will be back too, so we'll go through their books somewhat. Learn more about from Commissioner Jepson on granting, the grants that DED puts out. I think we need an understanding of how they vet that and making sure that see where there might be duplication and the grants that are put out and their ways of consolidation, things like that. So then at 2:30, we're going to take up H512. We're gonna see where the committee is on the event tickets and see if we can vote that out today. So then we'll get the floor.
Is that, we're using the latest draft from last week?
There's a new draft
512.
that he's working on right now.
Oh, okay.
Going through editing now, but he'll be bringing us a new draft. I think it'll incorporate some of the pieces that we wanted, like, you know, if you're a reseller, you have to post that on your webpage. When you talk about there's only 3% of tickets left, you have to know that it's on our website. So it doesn't make it sound like it's the whole event. And I think we have to discuss, we are going to have a 10% cap. That's the big one.